Hello, beautiful people. And
Hello.
oh my goodness. And welcome to actually, it's kind of another installment, but it's got a little bit of a twist. This is our 27th Coffee Chat episode, but really it's got a whole new spin because it's our first ever Coffee Chat Collabs episode. So we're out here doing new things, trying to keep things spicy for you all. It's going to be a party. So are you excited, Mackenzie?
I'm very excited to welcome a guest today that typically we do a lot of interviews with authors within, New Degree Press, authors we've worked with, authors who have just recently published, authors who are currently writing. But today we're going to talk with another author who we haven't yet had the opportunity to work with, but are excited to chat with today, particularly about their experience writing and being very successful on, might I add, Kindle Vella.
Well, really. So without further ado, dramatic drum roll as we bring our guest onto the stage. Hello.
Hi, hello everyone.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Kelly Anders. I have been part of Amazon Bella since shortly after its inception. I train horses, I write books, I create content, and love the strange and weird. So when one of my friends was like, "Hey, have you heard of Bella?" and I was like, "No, I've never heard of it before." I thought it sounded like a great opportunity. I appreciate y'all having me here today.
We're so excited to have you. And when you said you love the strange and weird, that emotionally and spiritually resonated with me. So thank you for saying that. So
Absolutely.
for our first question, since you mentioned that you've been a part of the Kindle Vella community since its inception, what do you like most about Kindle Vella?
One of the things I love about Kindle Vella, because it really speaks to the pantser in me. I'm not the best at plotting out things all the time. So it gives me a wonderful opportunity to take feedback that I get from my readers and change the next thing I'm going to write. Or maybe there have been so many times I'm like, I was going to do this, but now I'm going to do something totally different. And people really love the live feature of that, knowing that they can participate, knowing that they can have a say in the story. So if you think about like your favorite author, if they ever asked what your opinion might be on something, that would be really fun, right? So I think that's one of the reasons it's been very successful. And the short story format goes all the way back to Charles Dickens and Great Expectations. He released that in serial format. So it's not really a new concept, just something new for Amazon, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yes, Pickwick Papers, anyone?
Literally anything by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Artistry.
Right.
Serial artistry. So it's interesting that you talk about short form content and the history of that. Would you say that you have your own personal history with short form content?
I do because, like many other people, I'm ADHD. So having bite-sized chapters and bite-sized reading is something that really appeals to me. When I was a child, I really loved graphic novels because it gave you so much in a bite-sized format that you didn't have to have all of that information coming at one time. So even as an adult, I have a hard time sometimes with really, really, really long and verbose writers because my brain just stops absorbing after a little while. So the short format is really perfect for somebody like me that is challenged in some of those ways. It's almost like it's tailored for somebody with a shorter attention span, not just for a writer, but also for readers. People like it gives it a snappy feeling because everything changes and you can write. The chapters are a minimum of 600 words all the way up to I think it's 5,000 words per chapter. And I definitely do not do the 5,000 words per chapter. That is not my style. But typically, my episodes run between 600 to 1,200 words, just depending on which series it's in and what content I have that I want to put out in that particular episode.
Do you find that like towing the line between creating bingeable content, so like releasing a bunch of stuff, even though it's short form at the same time, versus like releasing very episodically and leaving them wanting more? Like what's your strategy / thoughts on just those words?
One of my, I have a couple of different series, and one of my favorite ones is written under a pen name. I write it under K. Anderson because it has a lot of personal information. And like many people who have been in a domestic abuse situation or things like that, keeping yourself safe is really important. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the series, The L Word, or it's kind of like Sex in the City, but everybody is, gender fluid, queer, or gay. And that's really what I was thinking about when I started this series, because I try to talk very much about what's happening in my life, because I find that's something that's really underrepresented in our community. So I want other people to be able to walk away from reading this and realize that they're not alone in their situation. So I think that that's been something that's been cathartic to me as well. And I think that the readers really enjoy it. And I know that sometimes when I will be in a period where maybe I'm not writing as much about personal things, I'll actually have people reach out to me on social media and be like, are you okay? Are things going all right? Because they kind of figured out that maybe if I wasn't writing about something very personal right that moment, maybe it wasn't safe for me to do so. But it created a really unique community because I started making connections and friends and building relationships with complete strangers who had had similar situations. They said, this speaks to me and it speaks to my heart. And that was probably the most rewarding part of the whole thing, is that so many people have said, I always want to see, like, what's your new thing? And, I publish at least once a week on it. And if I ever fall behind, I definitely have people who are like, girl, what's going on? Where's my stories? Where are you at? What am I going to read without you? So, it does create a sense of drama and fun. So I try to think about that in a kind of, if it was a TV show, you want to have people tuning into the next one. So that makes it exciting.
Yeah. Oh, and this transitions well into our next question, which is kind of like, what is your strategy for like the content that you create? Just like you were just saying, drawing from personal experience is one very powerful way that you find motivation to write. So how do you brainstorm content for the next serial story?
I try to take notes as I'm going along. I am a sandbox writer. I like to put all my sand into a pile and then I can shape it and I can make something with it later. But I realize that if I don't put the sand into a bucket and dump it somewhere, I'm never going to be able to build a masterpiece with it. So one of the hardest things to me is taking time every single day to write, even if I end up hating it. And honestly, sometimes I do. I'm like, this is terrible. Why does anybody read anything that I write? But at other times I could go back and look at it and be like, you know what? I'm going to change this a little bit, and what comes out is so much better. Or on the flip side, you have this amazing idea and you're like, I'm not going to write it down. I'll do that later. And then later comes along and you're like, I don't remember a thing about it, or what you come up with.
Not at all.
So happens all the time. So I do try to do that. In some of my other stories, I do plot. I do a timeline plot a little bit more. I write a children's series as well that's been very successful, called The Afternoon Horse Club. And it's been the top selling children's, it's fiction, but it's been the top selling children's for a long time on Amazon Vella for months and months and months. So that one, I do have a little bit of a storyline that I'm following. But really the farm confessions are just, they're my real life. It's pretty raw and it's pretty uncut.
So earlier on, you mentioned something about how like your readers sort of hold you accountable to like producing more content. And since you're able to experiment with the kinds of stories that you tell, like you just mentioned your children's Kindle Vella series, how did you find your readers on Kindle Vella? Like, did you have an audience and they transferred over to the space, or?
I did not have any sort of reader base when I started doing this. I use social media, Facebook, groups that I'm in. One of the best things that I can say for marketing is talk about your work where it's relevant. It's like a conversation with a friend. Nobody wants to be sold to, right? But if we're talking about something that's relevant and I'm like, hey, you might enjoy reading this, or your friends might enjoy reading this, then that's a lot more organic and just a lot more approachable to people, because Just like in groups, they have no advertising rules because they don't want people to just blast stuff that nobody cares about. But if it's something that you care about and you've built rapport with people, or that you're in a targeted audience that's relevant to those, core things, it becomes very unique as a situation, especially if you can get people to share it. That's the biggest thing, is asking people, can you share this for me? Can you share this where you think people might enjoy it, or share this with people that you think might be interested? Because that's how you get seen in front of a more diverse audience, which ends up being really important.
Makes the algorithm happy.
Absolutely. You've got to feed the monster. You've got to feed the beast. I do Facebook content creation. I've been a power admin with Facebook, and I'm a certified community manager with them. So I'm very conscious about trying to create content when I post things about it that people will respond to. So you don't just want to say, here's my book, I want y'all to read it. You need to say something like, here's the situation I'm having, and it's addressed in this chapter. Have you had something like this happen? How does this make you feel? Because that's how you get people really interested and drawn into what you're doing. They start to really identify with it.
Yes. It's like we've told authors before, don't just tell people, buy my book, just talk about your book, and that'll get more organic sales than anything else.
Absolutely. For people who write nonfiction, I think it's really important to don't be afraid of your niche. Everything I do is pretty niche. One of my other series, I do horse training and horsemanship. And I started that because I realized I was answering the same question lots and lots and lots of times. So I could put it into the Kindle Vella format, and then I can tell somebody, if you want to read about this particular halter breaking a young horse that doesn't want to be handled, go check out chapter 13, and they will actually go and do so. And then it makes me a little bit of money at the same time. There is nothing wrong with making money from your knowledge.
Yeah, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is not the most eloquent of transitions, but it is our next question that we have. So the question is, we're talking about growing audiences and we're talking about readers. So it's a natural transition, but I'm just being weird about it. How do you leverage the episodic nature of serialized content to engage with your audience? Like you mentioned earlier, you're having them tune in for the next one, right? So they know what to expect. But I'm just interested in your take on this question.
Kindle Vella has recently introduced polls that you can add at the end of your chapter as well. So you can literally ask people, you can give them 3 choices. Would you like to hear this? Would you like to see this character? Do you want me to approach this series next? So it gives people a really unique opportunity to provide feedback that will shape the future of what they're reading. And I find that is something people get very vested into. They want to see what you do with their ideas. And it's kind of like if somebody handed you some paint and a canvas and they said, I have this idea, what can you do with it? It may not be your best work, but they're going to love that because they feel like they were part of that creation. And every time they read that, every time they look at it, it's going to make them feel good.
I think that's really helpful to consider because, oftentimes, particularly within writing spaces, there's sort of this weird expectation that serialized content, even though it's been an integral part of our history, like you said, it seems like oftentimes discourses for authorship are very much between standalone short pieces like articles or blog posts, or longer content like novels, novellas, etc. So to your point about really leveraging opportunities to engage, like the poll feature, I think that a quick follow-up question that I have for you would be, so do you find that the kinds of questions you pose to your audience depend on because you mentioned that you use pen names too, depend on the persona that you're adopting, or is it more?
No, it is absolutely individualized. So what I'm going to maybe write in my children's books, or things I might ask in that, are going to be very fluffy, and they're going to be, what's your favorite color of this, or things that will get people to engage, but maybe not as serious. Some of the things I do are on a much more adult level. I do a series that is a little bit spicier under a pen name of Matt and Cherrywood, and the feedback on that is going to be a very adult, about the relationships between the characters and things like that. So in a way, I think people like that because if you've ever played role-playing games and things like that where you can help develop the relationships between characters, that can be a lot of fun and it can be very engaging. So sometimes writing from the serialized version and using feedback is kind of like side quest after side quest, and you can tie them all together and end up with really cool segments.
Did you ever read on Wattpad?
Yes, I did. I do actually.
I can tell. I can tell, and I was hoping you did because I was like, do we have another Wattpad friend? Because I think that's another thing that leads to the success of things like self-publishing in general, but also Kindle Vella. And then also I kind of have the follow-up question for you of like, why Kindle Vella? Why is that a place where you choose to publish a lot of your work?
I really like Amazon. I've had good customer service experience with them. Bella, just like any new product, it had problems. You know, there were glitches, there were issues, but I like that they have taken the feedback that authors give them. And I feel like they are trying to develop something that's a little bit different, a little bit unique, and they're genuinely interested in making it something for both authors and readers. So to me, that's worth investing my time into as well. I do regular self-publishing through them, so I was already very familiar with the KDP self-publishing for traditional formats as well. So it was, to me, it was just an easy transition, an exciting opportunity. And I was like, well, I mean, really, what do you have to lose? You've got the time, you've got the ideas in your head, you might as well put it out there. And if nobody reads it, nobody reads it. But surprisingly, people read it.
I mean, that's very encouraging here. I think another follow-up question that I have, particularly in leveraging the Kindle Vella platform, is that one of the features is that you can take a bunch of episodes or when you're at the end of a given serial, it like compiles or it can be compiled into an ebook. So I guess, would you say that it's helpful for authors to think of their serials in terms of the opportunity to compile them, like eventually like making it into a final product later? Or is it better to just treat it like an ongoing thing until you find that you've reached an end?
That is a great question, actually. And I tell people that Kindle Vella is basically, you can get paid for beta readers is the way I look at it. Especially starting out, I didn't really have the money for a professional editor, so I did a lot of the work myself, but there's always going to be things that you miss, and nobody points it out like your readers. They're like, hey, you missed something there, or hey, there's a discrepancy there, you misspelled that grammar. But those are all things you want to make sure that you have fixed before it goes into your final format. So with Kindle Vella, once you have closed your series, after 30 days, you can reformat that into like your ebook. I have found that because I've done completed series and uncompleted series, and I find that the completed series typically end up being less profitable than the uncompleted series. So like my children's series, The Afternoon Horse Club, I think it's got 30 something episodes. Farm Confessions has 60 something episodes. At one point, I do plan on releasing these into series. So the children's will probably be about 10 chapters per book. Children's books are a little bit shorter. And I'll probably do 2 books on the Farm Confessions. I'll do like a before everything exploded and an after everything exploded type book series. But it's a really great format to be able to get yourself ready for publishing. And you can make money while you're doing that. So to me, it is an absolute win-win situation. There's not a downside to it.
How do you feel about publishing on Vella versus on your own blog site?
I have never had much success on publishing on my own blog site. You can pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time trying to figure out SEO and how to get seen and all of those things. But Kindle Vella spends a lot of money on that on their own. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I definitely don't want to pay to reinvent the wheel. They've got huge mechanisms already in place. So I feel like if I can just get my content seen to where it starts getting picked up in Amazon's algorithm, then I can let it do a lot of that heavy lifting for me. and using things like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook are just really important on getting people interested in what you're doing.
So another quick question, especially since you're sort of talking about, like Mackenzie just astutely asked about how you see Kindle Vella as a value add in terms of putting your work in front of people you wouldn't have otherwise had access to. So earlier on, you were talking about readership and how they sort of hold you accountable to like adhering to a certain cadence. Since you're an author who does and or has done and continues to do like multiple different serials at the same time, like what are ways that you like organize that for yourself, like without it getting like too overwhelming?
No, most of it is just discipline. I know that every week on every one of my stories, I'm going to publish at least one chapter. And if I have a lot more to say, or I can bank some other things, I can do that. Another nice feature is that you can publish ahead of time, so you can have things scheduled to run later. So I can have 7 different chapters ready for my next 4 weeks, but I can schedule them for a future date. So just like anything else with self-employment, self-discipline is incredibly important to be successful in this, because you have to put out regular content. You have to make sure that you are putting out the information in your social media, and that you are doing it as close to real time as possible. So I use a simple Excel spreadsheet that I use to track my episodes, and Kindle has good reporting on looking at what's getting read and what's not getting read. So that gives me a better idea of what's hitting and what's not hitting. And then I also have an old-fashioned notebook that I use. I like to handwrite things out sometimes. It helps me think. And I like that I can just open it up and look at it. So in this day and age, I know that sounds crazy, but I still use a regular notebook for a lot of things.
Not at all. I completely agree. I like to do a lot of mind mapping myself. Yeah. Kyra's trusty notebook.
Yeah, right. You can't go wrong. It'll never crash on me.
No.
No Wi-Fi glitches. No.
Right.
No
It might get lost. It might catch fire, but it'll never spontaneously crash.
There is that.
Okay, remember when I said I had one more question?
Go ahead, no problem.
This is my last one before the formal Q&A section. So, like, something about the Kindle Vella platform that, or rather opportunity or space, that Mackenzie and I have noticed is that that most of these series, well, all of them, give you access to the first 3 episodes for free. So how important are those first 3 episodes?
They are critical. Nobody's going to pay to read chapter 4 if chapter 1, 2, and 3 bores them. And that's just the truth. I think it's important to get people hooked so that they want to read what the next thing is, that they're willing to pay for the tokens. And I think it's important too to choose your chapter side for chapters, especially 4, 5, and 6, because people don't want to drop a huge amount of money for tokens if you haven't already earned their trust as a writer. Later on in your series, they're willing to pay more money because you've already established that you're going to put out content that they want to pay for. But if somebody's 4th chapter is 25 tokens, I'm probably never going to read it. If it's under 12, seems to be the magic number. So between 6 to 12 tokens, most people don't balk at. But once you get over 12 tokens, I've definitely noticed a decline in the amount of people that will unlock it. Now, Amazon does pay a little bit more for the larger chapters. So it ends up being a toss-up, which is why my particular strategy has been get them hooked with short, wonderful things at the beginning, and then I can increase them in length later on and be more profitable. Because if somebody's already bought 20 chapters, they're going to buy 21, 22, and the rest as well. They'll pay for it.
Well, thank you so much for answering our questions so far, Kelly.
Of course.
Like we have a couple of questions in the chat, and if you guys continue to have some, do not hesitate to drop them in the the chat bubble on this side. Yes. So just to sort of get things started, the first question we have is from Welby, the icon himself. how many words would you say is good for an episode? You mentioned that you have like an average, but is there like you mentioned that you have an average, but is there something where you've noticed that it's dependent on content or is it more dependent on audience?
Absolutely. It's all intertwined. You've got to know your audience. So in a children's series, they're going to expect those chapters to be much shorter. But you'll find that a parent, if their child likes what they're listening to or reading, they will buy the whole series. And that's how you become profitable with children's books. Things like spicier, more adult writing, people want to see more development in the characters. They want to see those relationships and interactions, and they become more invested in it. So you definitely need to know who you're writing for, and also what their pocket spend is, as far as what you think that you never want to assume what somebody will pay for your work, but you do need to make sure it's appropriate for your audience. For starting out, especially in your new chapters, you don't want to make them as long as possible because nobody's going to pay to read that. So I would say, and it's something we talk about a lot as authors. There are a few Vella authors who do very well with writing 2,000 words. There are some that do really well with 5,000 words, but most of us seem to find the sweet spot is somewhere around 1,200 words.
That's very interesting.
That's very helpful.
It is. It's always an experiment.
So this is something you touched on a little bit, but more specifically, what made you choose Kindle Vella over similar platforms that exist?
I like Wattpad, but I did not get the readership that I got on Vella. I think that especially as it becomes more pushed through their own self-promotions, through their marketing campaigns and things, Wattpad is a great place for existing people who are looking for something new and exciting to go. But I think for your average person, so many people use Amazon already. So if you can imagine Joe Schmo, who never really bothers to get into serialized writing, would never get into Wattpad, is shopping for socks on Amazon, and something comes up about, hey, there's this new thing we have, get these free tokens. And that's one of the things Amazon has been doing, is giving new Vella readers free tokens. So the person who's shopping for something else sees this, hey, get these free tokens, limited time. Who doesn't love limited time free tokens? Next thing you know, they've clicked on it and they're looking into Vella. So the amount of eyeballs was really the deciding factor to me, and also the marketing money that Amazon puts into their own things.
Another question that we have for you is from Shannon, and you did touch on this a little bit too, because you were talking about you being a sandbox writer. But do you plot each episode or like a group of episodes? Because you mentioned that sometimes you schedule episodes in advance, but does that happen all the time, etc.?
I wish it happened more often, but I tend to be like, oh, I've got to get these in at the last minute because, let's be honest, that's just how life goes. But I try to do at least a group. I don't necessarily plot each episode as I'm going to do this in this episode, but I go with the concept of this is what I want to have happen next in my story. And as I'm writing it, when I come to around, whatever my comfortable word point is, or I come to a good stopping point, where that kind of happens naturally and organically. And then I think, what can I do to make this a little bit of a cliffhanger? And that's where I'll pause it for that chapter and I'll go to the next one. So I find a lot of times I end up writing 3 to 4 chapters at a time and then scheduling them out, because the idea that I have or where I want to take the story next isn't going to happen in just one chapter. And I don't want to make one huge chapter, because I will make more money by doing 2 or 3 small chapters than one huge chapter. That's a good question.
That's very true. Very true.
I have one last question. It's interesting because we're talking about why you chose Kindle Vella and how you're leveraging it as a space, and how, to your point, Amazon is really pushing for its discoverability in the algorithm. So for some reason, I swear it's connected. I know it's not a random tangent, but Kindle Vella is kind of reminding me of like the early days of TikTok, when everybody just sort of like dismissed it as like this very niche thing, but suddenly it just completely took over. Do you see that kind of trajectory for Kindle Vella as somebody who joined the community so early on? And would you advise authors to join sooner rather than later?
I would advise people to join now. I mean, really, to me, the sooner you can get in on something like that, the better. It was a lot easier. I will say this, getting favorites and crowns. So every week you get a favorite when you unlock a chapter, and then you can give your favorite series a crown. And crowns really end up adding up to big bonus money for the authors. We never know exactly what the algorithm is as far as how you get paid for what and things like that. But I know for a fact more crowns means more money. Right, exactly. So it ends up being one of those things where you want to make sure that you are relevant using hashtags, the summary of your story and things like that. Because when it first started out, there weren't many writers, so it was easier to be seen. And now there are so many more writers that you have to get a couple of favorites or things like that to get noticed. One of the things they do that I really like is they also push like they have like top favorite series, and they're pretty, Amazon I think is really good at putting up a lot of different content. So you just don't see the same like top 10 stories all the time. They started doing completed series to try to highlight those, because as I mentioned, you tend to make less money off a completed series than one that is still open. So I've just found that ends up being a new way that eyes get seen on it, and their hashtag system has gotten a little bit better as well. So they've made some good improvements based off the feedback that they've received from customers and from the authors.
This is a good transition into the last audience question that we will take, which is, how do you engage with readers and on what platforms? I think this is also kind of asking outside of Kindle Vella, because you just touched exactly on how to on Kindle Vella, but where else you are promoting your work.
I promote on all major platforms. I do Facebook, I do Instagram, I do TikTok. I am a big TikTok fan. It's probably one of my favorites. It is important to know your media as well and to understand what's going to get you pushed in the algorithm. So I highly encourage you as an author to take a little bit of time and educate yourself on what the algorithms can do for you and how you can, not to say manipulate those, but how you can position yourself better, because otherwise you're going to be spending a lot of time and energy on a hamster wheel that's going nowhere. Short video is critical. Back in the day, pictures, were where it was at, but Facebook has their Reels program. So you don't want to be posting just a picture of your book. You want to do a reel about it. You can show flipping pages. You can, I don't do a whole lot of things featuring me, but I will show pictures of things or clips. I use Canva all the time. It's a wonderful product to be able to create short videos, and it's super easy for anybody to learn. I don't have a graphic design background, but with Canva, I can make my book covers, I can make my clips, I can do promos. So I use that a lot. But whatever you feel comfortable in, understand that Instagram is going to Reels. Everybody's trying to emulate what TikTok is doing. Even YouTube is doing shorts now. So I suggest to subscribe to a magazine or a blog or somebody who's really good in social media, so that you can stay up to date on when algorithms change and what the platforms are really pushing at that moment, because it changes all the time.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. I mean, thank you for listing all of those tools as well. Like Canva, has a particularly special place in my heart. I'm still trying to understand TikTok, but to your point, us as authors being intentional and understanding the trajectory and the shape of what kinds of content people want to consume, that is important for us being discovered and embraced as artists and as storytellers and thought leaders. Because if we have to be willing to adapt to media to be discovered, outside of the parameters of the content that we present, right?
That's right. I'm talking about relevant things, going to places where people are discussing things that are relevant to what you're writing about are going to be really important to help build that sense of community and to help people understand where you're coming from as an author as well. I have found that there's definitely a portion of people that will follow you as an author because they like what you do and they like the different things you do. Maybe they don't read children's books, but I've had plenty of people go and read my children's series just because they wanted to support me as an author. So I suggest using Linktree or one of those other types of services where you can easily and in a kind of professional looking manner say, these are all of my Kindle Vella, these are my Wattpads, however, whatever platform you want to use. Linktree, it has a free version, and I think the pro is like $6, but you can put everything on there and refer people to it in your Instagram profile or on your TikTok profile or on your Facebook, which is what I do. So when people see my profile, they can click on my Linktree and see all of my different writing, not just the one story.
Thank you so much for that. So
I try to do things on a budget. I don't have a whole lot of money like everybody else. We're all trying to be as cost efficient as we can. So
yeah.
using things where you don't have to pay for traditional publishing, trying to save yourself an editor, getting beta readers at no charge and getting paid for them, to me was just a no-brainer. So I really encourage people, no matter what you think you want to write about, just start putting it out there and let people tell you what you might be able to do a little bit differently to better engage them.
So this is actually the last question. Do you have any final words of wisdom do you want to share with our audience and authors at large today?
I would say don't be afraid to fail. I will not tell you that all of my series have been successful because there have been some real bombs, and that's okay. If you do any sort of content creation, even on the social media platforms, I'm sure you've noticed you can spend hours making this beautiful, well-crafted content and like 3 people watch it. But then you spend 5 minutes putting together and you toss it up there and it goes completely viral. So you never know what is going to resonate. Be genuine, be authentic, be yourself, and your audience will find you.
Well, that's so helpful. It's also very encouraging because you're right. It just seems completely random what the algorithm decides to like. Like, of course, we have to do our research and figuring out what kinds of things are liked, but still, like, it's just like, okay, like, I spent 2 seconds on this. Now it's why. It took me 5 years to do this other one. And, like, it's wild. It's wild. But you make a valid point. Authenticity is essential because then
you can't expect to be successful every time, but as long as you keep trying and as long as you keep putting content out there, you'll get better at your craft as well. So one of the things that I write a lot about is not being insta perfect. I think that we sometimes set ourselves up and we set each other up to expect things that aren't really feasible. So going into things with the right expectation that, you know what, maybe nothing comes of this, but I'm going to have a great learning experience is a lot better from I'm going to go out there and be a top selling author, because, you know, that doesn't happen for everybody.
Well, we thank you very much for the time that you've spent with us this afternoon. I've learned a lot.
As have I. Yes, I'm excited. I'm really excited about Kindle Vella.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Find me, Kelly Anders, on any major social media or under Blue Raven Farms. And don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm a real person. I'm a nice person. I'm glad to help. You know, I think that the more we help each other, the better off we are. And some of the best people that I've met were through the strangest circumstances. So I think that's one of the beautiful things about life.
You hear that, authors? Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. I'm a shy girl, so I get it. I totally get it. I'm an introvert. I understand it's sometimes outside of my comfort zone, but you know, that's why I love to help people. It's what really fuels me at the end of the day. So don't be shy. Reach out there. I promise you, people care and they're interested.
Thank you again, Kelly.
It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Oh my gosh. That was awesome. That was so great. What a way to start off with Coffee Chats Collabs, like, you know, framing. Like, wow. Couldn't have asked for better.
Yes. So with that, if there's anyone that you're dying to hear from that you would love for us to interview, absolutely send them our way. We are interested in talking to anyone and anything related to books that you can think of. So feel free to suggest a topic below. Feel free to leave it in the chat before this video ends. And we promise that we do monitor and check and we look at those.
You're also more than welcome to reach out to us individually through Instagram. You could reach out to manuscripts@ed on Instagram as well. Like, similarly to what Kelly said, we're real people. So don't be shy. You can reach out to us as individuals too, but especially if it pertains to coffee chats, probably the fastest way to get to us would be to drop comments inside of the video below.
That.
Yes. Absolutely. But with all that being said, I'm super excited just to continue to hone in on this space. We actually have a episode planned when it's just going to be Mackenzie and I soon. We're trying out that format. So come in and join us, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll be taking questions, and just stay tuned for more details.
See you next time.
Bye, beautiful people.